Hey guys, okay, so now that we've talked about some of the stuff going on in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages or the medieval period, depending on who you ask, we're now going to get to the point where we're going to start to see some nations develop, and one big nation is the Holy Roman Empire, which of course we've said repeatedly that is neither holy nor Roman nor an actual empire. And the interesting thing is the first guy crowned the Holy Roman Emperor, Charlemagne, had nothing to do with this. This all has to do with a guy by the name of Otto of Saxony, who is able to really establish power in Germany and modern day Hungary, in that he is able to take his family kind of control area, then crush a group known as the Magyars and get them out. He rules from 936 to 973. He is also known as Otto the Great, and he really starts to establish this empire, which will last into really the 15 and 1600s and will reach its height under the Habsburg family, which we'll talk about later. And this is Otto's crown because, again, people with hats, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now the interesting thing about this, and this is something we're going to talk in the future, it is in the Holy Roman Empire that we start to get our first battles between popes and kings, and it happens in the year 1077. Now, Otto, in alliance with the pope, started using something called lay investiture. What lay investiture is that popes gave kings the power to appoint bishops, which they would often appoint family members and things along that line. And this was given to him, and they could do it a certain amount. Now, one of his descendants, Henry the Fourth of the Holy Roman Empire, tries to expand it and really take lay investiture to, unfortunately, as I would say, new heights. Well, Pope Gregory the Seventh tells him he can't do that, and what he ends up doing is excommunicating Henry when he refuses to listen. Now, excommunication means you are kicked out of the church. If a regular guy like you or me gets kicked out of the church, not so good. If you're a king, other empires have the opportunity to maybe attack you. So in 1077, what he actually ends up doing is going up to a papal residence in the mountains. The Pope makes him wait outside and kneel in the snow for 3 days. He later then has him kiss his feet to show his power over him. Now, a couple years later, Henry will actually invade Rome and get Gregory out, and a new pope will be appointed. But even though the papacy is starting to grow in strength, kings are starting to not like it, and that will cause some problems. Now, in the Middle Ages, it being the Holy Roman Empire, will reach its height during the reign of Frederick Barbarossa, who lived from 1155 to 1190, and he really is going to expand it, if you look here, to include a big chunk of France, all of Germany, a good chunk of Poland, and we have some other states in here, in northern Italy and Austria. Um, the Netherlands and Belgium, and down here the bottom of Italy, I mean, and Sicily as well. He will be known for bringing back the actual laws of Justinian, the Corpus Juris Civilis, and trying to get that reestablished until he tragically drowns in a river on the way to the Third Crusade, which I'll talk about later. But nonetheless, the Holy Roman Empire is basically a country. Okay, and it's going to be something that is going to have a tremendous effect in the future, and it really gets established at this time. And the other big country I want to talk about this time would be France. Now, France, during much of the Middle Ages, after the fall of the Franks, really this was the homeland of feudalism. If you see here, you see Aquitaine and Gascon and Toulouse, Bourgogne, D'Anjou, Normandy. I mean, it's really crazy. And if you see by the early 900s, 987, these blue areas, Okay, that's only the areas that the King of France actually controls. But that's going to start to change under Hugh Capet, who actually becomes king and starts his own dynasty in 987. And what he is going to do is slowly but surely take some new tactics in trying to end feudalism. He is going to um, make alliances with certain nobles. He will often get nobles to bestow their lands to him when they die, and then they amazingly die very quickly. Um, and slowly but surely he exerts more authority. And if you look at this picture on the bottom, this ends up becoming the areas that he will control and that his dynasty will control within a couple hundred years after his death. So you're really starting to see them grow in power. And what really establishes France as a strong nation, keyword being nation, was the Hundred Years' War. The Hundred Years' War lasted from 1337 to 1453. And what ended up happening is King Charles IV of France dies. Well, and that's him on the right there. His cousin and half brother, it was weird, Edward III of England, because his mother was formerly a French queen, decides that he actually has rights and declares that he is now the king of France. He will be resisted by Philip IV, also known as Philip the Fair of France, and really start to challenge his power, and this war will begin. And in the early years, the English just wreck shop. As you can see here, when it started, you did have some English holdings down here, and the rest of this was France in 1337. And within 20 years, they own about, one third to a quarter, or a quarter to a third of France. And it really had to do with their top-notch military tactics and, as a lot of you guys ask, why, better technology. At the Battle of Crécy, the English longbow makes its debut. These guys could basically hit things accurately at least a quarter mile away, and the French were just not ready for this, and they just take a beating and a beating and a beating. There will be a short timeout for the Black Death from 1348 to 1356. It's kind of hard to have an army when everybody is dying. I know it sounds crazy, but like legitimately everybody was dying, and we'll get into that later. However, by 1360, they will be ready for a new phase to expand the war again. uh, France starts to recover a little bit and gain some of their land back by the 1360s, and by 1389 they take about half the land that they lost back, and they will have a basically a treaty with the English for about 25 years. There's some little kind of issues, but nothing really major. However, in 1415, Henry V of England, who Shakespeare liked to write some plays about, decides to get aggressive and comes back into France and really starts gaining quite a bit of land. That would then be changed by a very interesting individual, a woman by the name of Jeanne d'Arc, or we call her Joan of Arc. She was a peasant girl that, according to her, saw visions of God, and there's a variety of different explanations you could see for this, but is able to work herself up into getting or finding the King of France. Now, up to this point, and we're actually in 1429 at this point, France's royal line had basically died out except for Charles VII. Now, a lot of people didn't want to recognize Charles VII as the true king because they weren't sure if his dad was actually the previous king, so his line was a little shaky. However, with the ascendance of Jean, she was able to lead a victory in a number of battles, the most notable being the Siege of Orleans and then the Battle of Patay, in which she is able to have victories, and she does it for Charles. And in the end, is able to get him crowned king and reunify the country. Unfortunately for her, her next battle, she tries to retake Paris, which she is unable to do. Shortly after that, she will be captured by the English, who will put her on trial for a variety of things like heresy and wearing men's clothing. Yes, evidently that's a capital offense. There was some evidence that the English tried to ransom her back to the French, but Charles, supposedly feeling threatened by her, did not do that, and she would be executed. She would be sainted in the early 1900s, but this young girl, who really we only know anything about her life from the ages of 18 to 20, 29 to 1431, comes in and completely changes the fortunes of France. And had it not been for Joan, I don't know if the French are able to pull this off. But in the end, she is able to get that unification. France is able to push back, as you can see here when Joan comes around. They have now lost continuing areas, and then a couple duchies actually broke away. Joan comes back, gets the organization going, and then, as you can see, by 1453, the French are able to win and thus really solidify themselves as a nation. So this country that was fractured in 987 is able to slowly come together and then become one of the more dominant countries in the world. And even today, yeah, people like to joke about, the military of France and things like that, but you cannot deny the fact that they are a legitimately strong nation in the world. So we have some nations building. We're going to be talking about England soon, and really, really this growth out of the Dark Ages. All right, get your questions and comments, and I'll see you guys soon.